Today is the 23rd of February, 2010. We are at the Isaac Griswold Public Library in Whitehall, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. I'm with the State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs, New York. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
My name is Colin William Thompson, and I was born in Plattsburgh, New York, April 16th, 1942.
And did you attend school in Plattsburgh?
Yes, I attended grade school there, but my father was a correction officer. We moved to Dannemora, New York, and I went on there from grade school through high school, and then started college in Plattsburgh, and then I deferred to go into the military before even completing that first year of college in Plattsburgh.
And what year did you graduate from high school?
Graduated from high school in 1960.
And you mentioned going into the Army. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted.
And why did you pick the Army?
I picked the Army because I was looking forward to for a career as well. And at that time when they were recruiting, they were offering careers and choices of places to go.
Mm-hmm.
However, in basic training, when it came time to go, there was a little difference as far as the records went, and what was supposed to, where I was supposed to go didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in and I was told by this sergeant, he says, listen, he says, you should go into ordnance. And I says, well, I enlisted for Germany because I thought I'd like to go over there, and I thought I'd like to work at a post office, and I thought I'd be enlisting for that. But well, I got my way. Maybe he was right. He wanted to jack me up, you know, like a surrogate father.
Mm-hmm.
But they made their effort, and I made their choice, and I think it was a good one. Although it was quite an experience to have a surrogate father there saying, mm-hmm. well, listen, you scored high in maintenance, you should go there. So I did start a career after in the post office
all right.
well.
Let me just go back a second. Whereabouts did you go for your basic training?
I went to basic training Fort Knox, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And it was from there that I was told that I would go to ordnance.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you go to a postal school?
Yes, I did. From there I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison.
And whereabouts is that?
And that's in Indiana.
Okay.
Right.
And how long was that school?
That school was, as I recall, it was about 5 weeks mm-hmm. before going to Fort Dix to be shipped overseas.
Did you get any sort of leave in between time?
Yeah, I recall coming home from leave from basic. Can't remember many details about that. Had a sweetheart back home. Mm-hmm. I remember that was probably a primary reason at the time. Uh-huh. But thank God for unanswered prayers.
So you were shipped over to Germany. Did you fly over?
No. As a matter of fact, went over in the USS Patch. And that was quite an experience. It was mm-hmm. in the North Atlantic, and it was quite an experience.
Were you shipped with other people you trained with?
Yes, I was, yeah. Mm-hmm. Lifelong friends, as a matter of fact. Unfortunately, one has passed away. Mm-hmm. That was a sad surprise. I was trying to reach him out in Rochester and learned that he was in a adult home, and when I got there, they said he passed away a year ago. Oh. And that was a heart-wrenching, mm-hmm. choking kind of experience.
Sure.
Missed him.
What was that ship ride like?
It was cold in the North Atlantic. It was in the early spring. It was in May. Mm-hmm. And we huddled under vents, as a matter of fact, you know, to keep warm, uh-huh. exhaust vents.
Did you get
guard duty? Guard duty was quite an experience. That was something we thought was very important that we were doing, guard duty in the ship as we were going over. Kept us busy.
Uh-huh. And whereabouts did you land?
In Bremerhaven, Germany. And it was good to learn that was a major shipping port, because on a cruise recently I won a contest knowing that Bremerhaven was a shipping port, and they wanted to know where that particular cruise ship was built that we were on, and I won the prize for saying Bremerhaven, and I only knew that because that was the main shipping port in Germany.
Now, when did you go over there?
That was in May of '61.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And what was your impression of Germany at that point?
Felt kind of lost. First time we got off the transport train on the way to our new station. Walked in a restroom in a restaurant, and we saw Damen and Herren on the doors. We had no idea what that was, except that they had a rooster and a hen on the tubes to give us a clue as to what we were going through.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what was your post like, where they sent you?
That was very interesting. It was one of Rommel's former tank garages,
Mm-hmm.
with the old anchors in the cement. And it was the 73rd Army Postal Unit, and it had been fashioned, this former tank garage had been fashioned into a post office. And it was very interesting to see it operating like a post office when we first got there.
Mm-hmm.
At Fort Benjamin Harrison, we learned how to handle certain things, documents, have to do with customs and whatnot, and handling money. But the first time I ever been on the other side of a window in a post office, as a matter of fact, that struck me as being interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and learning more about the vehicles we'd be using too, as a matter of fact.
Now, speaking of vehicles, did you have to go to a depot to pick up bulk mail to be sorted, or how did that work?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we had our deuce-and-a-half trucks, and we were operating like finally we operated like a base post office, much like our post offices operate here, like section centers and just distributing mail all over. And we handled mail for the Air Force as well. But a lot of times we would bring mail to Frankfort, Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And this involved using a transportation company with the big tractor trailers, and we would ride shotgun on those expeditions, and handling the registered mail gave us quite a sense of responsibility. We were handling things from Warner Robins, and we were handling stuff that would be used at missile sites and other classified areas. We were handling some pretty sensitive stuff, and so we had a great sense of responsibility in protecting that.
Were there ever any incidents?
When you mention incident, one of my friends was in an accident on one of those runs, and he was lucky to come out alive. On the Autobahn, it was a big vegetable truck that hit this, and I can remember the sight of the van and the tractor that he was riding in. And it was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I didn't have any experience like that, but when you ask about it, that's the first thing that came to my mind, that he got out of it, so did the driver, got out of that alive.
So this was probably about 17 years after World War II?
Yeah, and this is interesting, because we befriended a number of German civilians, and I had some friends that worked in a finance company. We were in the headquarters at Panzerkaserne, and I had some friends that were in finance, and we went on Easter and Christmas to German families. And this being, I just said 17, it was 15 years after the war when I was there. And to sit down at this Christmas tree with real life candles on the tree and look through their album, and I'm looking through the album, and I'm sitting across from this fella, much like you are today, and you resemble him somewhat. And here, my father had only been out of the war for 15 years, and at my age now, putting this in perspective, that was just turning the corner in time. It was just like yesterday, and I'm looking at this album of him in his uniform in the German army, and my father had, God, only 15 years before had been out of the service in the Navy and after the Second World War. So that was quite a humbling experience, and it makes you realize that people all over the world with their families, you know, have the same values as we do. Their heartfelt things, and their albums, and their celebrations, just like ours. You know, they were thrown into the battle just like everyone else. You know.
Did you
I
see?
remember that very well.
Did you see any evidence of the war? Any
Yes.
bombed out buildings, etc.?
Yes, especially at Heidelberg. You know, the castle at Heidelberg, was there with some friends, and we saw the fireworks that they have weekly and during the summer. But going through there, you saw that the damaged parts of the castle, and many churches too. You would see where the damage was. I'd been there again 30 years later, and it's funny, after 30 years it wasn't quite as evident or as striking as it was back then when I saw it 30 years before in the service. Yeah.
How were you treated overall by the civilian population?
Treated very well by them. They were respectful of our holidays. They invited us to participate in those things. And the greatest problem with civilians was with the taxi cab drivers, and this usually happened when if GIs had been out. We were always instructed to be diplomatic and to be gentlemen at all times. But when there are GI bars, as there were many in Germany, there were many conflicts and arguments and worse with the taxi cab drivers. These people that invited us to their homes weren't taxi cab drivers. They were working people who worked in the mills, glass factories, and whatnot. Yeah.
Were you there for like Oktoberfest?
Yes, and Mayfest as well. And they were very how do I say, very festive. And you learn to sing along with the songs even if you didn't know the words. God, you swore you did, you know. So there was a lot of dancing and singing, and we're also mindful of being courteous and representing our units, and tell you. With what was served, you know, the wine and the beer, somebody might have to grab you by the arm and give you a nudge and remind you once in a while, because, as I say, it was festive, joyous, and we were young men.
What did you do for your during your time off periods? Did you travel or?
Yes, as a matter of fact, working a window in the post office, and met some of the other people who would have the opportunity to invite me. For instance, one USO girl at Landstuhl, she said, we're going to Holland. She says, would you like to come along on the tour? And I said, you know, I didn't see that yet. Don't even ask me again. I said, when do I sign up? So I was able to get the time off, and I was able to get the pass. And I was able to go on that, and that was a memorable vacation. As a matter of fact, she invited me to her wedding. She married a captain about 5 months later, and I was invited to the wedding, and I was really I really felt good about that. I really felt good that I was invited. So someone else, the U.S., and aside from that too, the USO, it's a great organization. They had always brought special entertainment into the NCO clubs and the service clubs. Top-notch stuff, I remember. Yeah.
Now, what rank were you over there?
I was a private first class. And we had, as a matter of fact, we had a lot of Specialist 4 and Specialist 5s who were old enough to retire in civilian life, it seems. So rank was pretty frozen in that. There was some. I can remember that these fellows, just like they were almost like grandfathers to some of us. Some of these fellows were that old that were still in our unit. Right.
Did you get to Berlin at all?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I had to get a special clearance to Berlin. before I went, and then it hadn't come through yet, but I still managed to get to Frankfurt,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to get to the headquarters to make sure that I could get my clearance papers because I hadn't received them. I remember the fast taxi drive. I said, "Mach schnell der Bahnhof, bitte," and he drove like a bat out of Hades. And we got there, and this sergeant, I wish I could remember his name. I don't know why I didn't write it down, but he pulled out some files, and this was after just at closing time, and he took care of me, and he got me my papers, and I got on the train, and it made me really think how important it was in this country and how easy it is to get across the border here from the United States to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Just when we were on the train and we were sitting there, a little apprehensive, and I had just gotten these papers done for me quickly, and I'm really hoping that they're in order because this Gestapo-looking guy comes on the train as we're going into the eastern sector. This is before you get to Berlin,
Mm-hmm.
and that was an experience that I won't forget. That feeling as I was handing him the papers, everything was in order,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a great time in Berlin, and some stories that are really humorous that I would like to tell, and one involves a bar, and but that's up to you.
No, that's fine if you wanna tell us.
Yeah, because you can edit it if you want to. Well, there were 5 of us, and we went into this bar called the Chez Charlie, and we're looking, and these are big girls, and the bartender's got a rather husky voice. Looking at the action out there, and the dancers are out there, scantily clad, and I'm looking at some of the girls, pretty sharp. But anyway, we left and we went back to the hotel, and the bartender there says, saw a book of matches that we took out of the place. Chez Charlie, yeah. He says, "You know where you guys are at?" He says, "That's a transvestite bar you were at."
Oh, jeez.
And I said, "My God," I said, those high heel shoes sure look kind of big," I said. Yeah, but we were naive.
Uh-huh.
You know, we had a good time, and it was all harmless, and I suppose that's the way it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
That was quite an experience. Yeah.
Any other stories?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, going through, we had to be on a special bus with our uniforms on with a patch in order to go into East Berlin. So we crossed at the Brandenburg Gate, and we were over there, and we went to Memorial Cemetery where Lenin was buried, standing up. And as we're passing down the streets and looking out the window of our olive drab bus, we saw people standing back in the windows and waving to us, so they couldn't be seen from the street, but they knew we could see them.
Mm-hmm.
And these buildings were built in about 1953, so they were about 7 years old, but the facades were already falling apart. And they talked about how these were built quickly over there in the East as a showpiece,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't really built to last. They weren't built that well. And everything was it just seemed like a deserted city in East Berlin as compared to the West, which was like being on Broadway in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was quite an eye opener.
Did you see the wall?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we had to go past the wall at the Brandenburg Gate, and there by the wall were the wreaths and the photographs of those people who had died trying to escape by
Mm-hmm.
climbing the wall or by other means, trying to go under
Mm-hmm.
barricades and whatnot. Yeah, saw those, and this is why it was so emotional with just this year, the anniversary of the tearing down of the wall. That sitting there and hearing that again was such a memorable thing. It really was, because the people I know that are still there, and have had difficulty in trying to reach them. There was a promise that one of them, when he got back from vacation, would get in touch with me. It didn't happen, and the don't know why, but I had people there helping me through the archives in Germany and whatnot, trying to locate, especially this one person who I learned his mother had died, and her husband had been left in the East, and I was just hoping that I would learn that they had been reunited when the wall came down.
How long were you over there for?
I was there from May 61 to December 20th to December 21st, I think it was. No, about the 19th. It was about 9 days coming back on the boat. So we got back the day after Christmas because the longshoremen in New York were on strike, so they didn't get us into port. So we were actually circling around at Christmas and got in the day after.
So you came back by ship also?
Yeah, came back by ship as well.
Wow. Yeah. What was it like for you coming back to the United States?
Now,
I mean, did you regret having to leave Germany, or were you anxious?
no, I did have, you know, most of us having been there almost 3 years, we always carried around the short timers canes, you know, and we all had our name tags attached to it, and there was this, we were anxious to get back home. However, there were still some ties. You missed some of the people that were there, but you always had this feeling you're sure that you're going to meet them again. And efforts have been made to do that, especially with the civilians. But knowing that coming back to this country would be reunited with our friends that we'd served with. As a matter of fact, he and his wife visited my wife and I this summer, and we had seen them once before since being out of the service. He was from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he made a career in the post office after his MOS at the post office in the service in Germany. Dwayne Scribner, and a dear friend of mine, and his wife is a very good friend of my wife's now. And we'll be getting together again, maybe in Nashville this next time. They're pretty close to it being up there in Fort Wayne.
Now, were you discharged at that point, or were you sent on to another post?
No, I was actually discharged from Germany right into a port in New York, and as a matter of fact, on that day, this friend I'm talking about from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and the other friend who was discharged at the same time, Neil Farron, the one who I said had died the year before I got to the nursing home, a year too late. We'd gone to his house. His father worked in Rochester and Kodak, and it's a small world. His mother was a nurse, was a lady from Dannemora, where I was brought up, and shortly after that, within a month after that, they came to my home in Dannemora. Neil Farron and Dwayne Scribner came to my home in Dannemora, and I gave them a tour of Lake Placid and showed them the bobsled run and things like that. And my father gave them a tour of the Dannemora prison, Clinton prison, and to this day, Dwayne says, you know, says one of the most memorable things I had in my life was the tour of that prison in Dannemora that your father gave us. Yeah. So, you know, I was in touch with them, and I still am, and there's still, whenever I'm out in the area where I knew someone was from, like Eugene Maurer out there in Johnstown, PA, I ask people if they know where he is, and another fellow up there in Tonawanda, I'm always asking about him. He was a fellow that was in that accident that I mentioned on the Autobahn. And I look in the phone book and trying to find them. I haven't had any luck in that regard in those instances.
Well, maybe with the internet you might have better luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Did you consider making the service a career at all?
At one point. But that passed quickly. It passed. I felt that what I had was able to do, and the opportunities that I was given. For instance, the GI Bill.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about
that. That allowed me to actually to get back in college again,
Mm-hmm.
which I quickly had given up to go into service, and I did very well with that. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the greatest benefits that anyone can receive and participate in. And they have so many opportunities now for people enlisting for
Mm-hmm.
college that I highly recommend that they participate in that.
When you got back, did you join any veterans organizations?
It was a long time before I joined the veterans, and I have since. As a matter of fact, I'll be going down to the American Legion at the lunch site here today, and I've been going every week. That they provide a site for the people to participate in a county program
Mm-hmm.
that enables people to eat reasonably, nutritionally, meet socially, and it really benefits some people.
Mm-hmm.
They would like to have more people participate, like myself, to keep the numbers up so that the program can continue.
Mm-hmm.
And we volunteer our time and help that thing function. But the veterans help that as
Mm-hmm.
well. As a matter of fact, I've been asked to participate more fully in the veterans and honor guard and whatnot. But I've sort of kept a low profile, and I walk in and out of there, and I know there's one part of it I should probably just keep walking by, and I do.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I can say to that.
Okay. How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Well, you learn that discipline and being alert and aware is a very important thing, because so many other people depend on you for everything you do every minute.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't just mean in the foxhole. That means in your MOS, whatever job you're doing. If you're repairing trucks, or if you're, as I was, handling mail in the post office, that was a very important thing. So whatever career line you were involved with, it was important to be trusted and relied upon.
Hmm.
And if anything, I learned that. It was a very, very good lesson. That there's more about just having fun all the time,
Mm-hmm.
more than that.
And how did you end up in Whitehall?
In Whitehall, well, in order to, after I left the post office in Plattsburgh for a very good reason. It was, at the time I was ready to celebrate, because when I was working the post office, I was able to work for 56 hours. And it was during that first fall in the post office that, and I remember they passed a time and a half overtime bill. And when they did that, they split my shift and everyone else's and hired more people, so that I had to be, from where I was commuting 16 miles away, I had to be at the Plattsburgh, in or about the Plattsburgh office twice as long every day in order to get 40 hours a week in. And it was time to leave that, and I was on the list for correction on New York State Correction Officer. And when that opportunity came up, and it wasn't much long after that, I took that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to go through college and the GI Bill, and I became a correction counselor. So over half my career then in the New York State Department of Correction was as a correction counselor. And so I didn't just have to be locked in every day. I could have weekends and holidays off. And again, that kind of benefit about when you're in the service is how valuable it can be to take advantage of the education. It was important. And I wound up in a very nice little unit with people who are very close friends to this day. I know where each one of them is today.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of them have passed on. My friend Phil Dwyer just passed away, younger than I am. We're very tight. We're almost like family, that little unit we had down here at Great Meadow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just difficult to talk about that. But
Mhm.
anyway,
Do either of you have any questions?
Did you learn the German language when you were over there?
yeah, a little bit, enough to have fun and to keep out of trouble, and enough, as I said, enabled to get to that headquarters on the way to Berlin, and sitting down and having dinner with the people. Learned quite a bit because as a matter of fact, sometimes we would have an English-German dictionary and laugh a lot. Yeah, it was fun, and it's something to this day when I have the opportunity. I enjoy showing off a little bit. But like anything else, if you give an indication that you know German and they start coming right back at you with a full sentence and expect a reply, you're in trouble. Forget it. I'll tell you. But it's fun, and we've had foreign exchange students here.
Mhm.
Some German girls, French girls. My wife and I have had people come and with their chaperones. So we've had an opportunity to participate that way too. I'll never forget. I liked the German girl there. Everything was right on time. Yeah, and then where do we go? And then what next? And everything. The little Italian girl was, oh, I'm Italian, and she's combing her hair, taking her half-hour shower. You know, the cultural clash was a lot of fun. Yeah.
What were your feelings about driving on the Autobahn?
I didn't drive on the Autobahn too much because the vehicle I drove was a Jeep or a Taunus or a Deuce and a half, and it was usually between Kaiserslautern and Landstuhl. On the Autobahn, I was usually riding with friends out for a holiday or something in their Volkswagen, or some other family's automobile, or with the driver from the transportation company driving a tractor and a trailer. So I never drove on the Autobahn too much. I have driven on it being over there on vacation since. And I wasn't threatened by it. I felt quite safe, except that they do exceed the limits as opposed to here. I mean, there is no limit. It's wild, it really is. Yeah.
You mentioned you took a trip to Holland. Did you visit any other places? Did you went to France? Did you
Yes.
visit places in Germany?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I went to St. Naval, the American Military Cemetery there, and I was really impressed with the number of graves. We went with a USO group in a bus together in uniform, and as a matter of fact, it was 30 years later. I was talking about that vacation my wife and I took. I had to make sure that she saw that. And when I brought her there, looking at the graves, and we just happened to be in one part. We'd been there a half hour. I looked down and I saw Robert Chase. Yeah, Robert Chase. And I remember on the monument that the Legion has put down here, that name. And so I took a picture of it. I had my 35mm camera, and I came back, and I went to his brother Ed's store, and I said, you know, would this be your brother's marker from St. Naval Cemetery? He says, let me call it my brother George in California. And he did. And those were the dates, and it just happened to be his marker, and that's because of what I saw in the monument, the Veterans Monument down here. And just happening to be there with my wife 30 years later after having been there on that Memorial Day. There's another story about this. That day I was there in the service, a school bus pulled up with French children, young school children, and they laid the wreaths on the unknown soldiers' graves. And here I am 30 years later with my wife, and I'm talking with this woman at the desk at the cemetery, and I mentioned that to her, how I had been there 30 years before, and the flowers, the wreaths were put in. She says, I was one of those children while you were there. And she says, you know what the sad thing is? They don't do that today.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's another memorable place I went to was St. Avold. And we also, when we were over there, we went to some British military cemeteries too, but this was 30 years after. But that was the only military cemetery I went to when I was in the service. Other places. Yeah, I remember going down to Lido Beach in Rome, and I'd gone to the Vatican, and down on Lido Beach there was this big circular sign, and it said, Vota Comunista, vote communist in Italian. And I said, my God, we're awful close to it here, aren't we? And that was 1962, I believe that was.
Did you see any of the concentration camps in Germany?
No, I didn't. No, I only read about them and seen pictures about them, but I didn't visit them, no.
Any questions? Okay, thank you so much for your interview.
No, thank you.